This morning, I want to do a brief chat as a summary of a talk I'm going to be doing later this week on pain and on mindfulness. Now, this discussion is, in terms of the research and what we know about it, is evolving really quickly. So in the last 5 years, there's been an enormous exponential increase in the amount of research in this area. And we're lucky enough to have a lot of the findings coming out of people in Australia, especially out of Curtin and even UQ here. So the origin of this, though, goes way, way back to a talk that happened a good 2,500 years ago that I have in my hand from Buddha himself. Now, as many things that the Buddha talked about in his 84 long years on this earth, he spoke about one thing in particular that I use every day to help people understand and work through pain. And honestly, any uncomfortable situation that life throws at us. And that is the process and how we interact with the world and our responses, our habits with that, and how that relates to pain. So what the Buddha talked about was this process of two arrows. He talked about it. So when we feel something uncomfortable or painful, there's these two arrows that hit us. The first is the initial sensation. We all know it, that feeling of ache, of pain, the initial uncomfortable sensation that just registers in our nervous system. And the interesting bit is the secondary arrow. The second arrow that arrives is what he calls a mental one. And that's the amplification, the evaluation of the original arrow. And it's that sort of unpleasantness that we report when we feel something like back pain, when we feel something like tendon pain, whatever it is that we're seeing our physio for or complaining to our doctor about. It's not the pain itself necessarily that's the problem. It's the unpleasantness of it and the intrusiveness of it. Because many of us deal with pain on a daily basis. Without it, we can't, as a species, survive. We wouldn't have got here to this date. But when we go to see people for things, when we take Panadol, and we see the physio, and we talk to get even a surgery for something, it's to reduce the unpleasantness. And what mindfulness has, we're starting to realize, is an opportunity to reduce that unpleasantness. An opportunity to get a foot in the door to a habitual process that normally most of us wouldn't have even considered happening, and go, hang on, we can reduce this here. We can, as I say to my clients, take the guitar out of the giant amplifier on the concert stage and just hear the original sound of the strings being strummed. We don't have to plug it into the enormous amps and listen to the volume on 10, which is what some people's nervous systems, and we've all had an experience of this, can do to the original pain, the original arrow. So what mindfulness does is it offers this opportunity. But when I say mindfulness, what am I actually talking about? It's the capacity to pay attention to something without judgment, without evaluation, importantly here, in the present moment. So not what happened before, not what's happening tomorrow, but right now in your body. If you can just feel it, try and notice your own heartbeat in this moment. And notice how maybe challenging or easy that might be for you. And just in this moment to feel the rise and fall of your chest. At every moment, we're given sensations that are either of three categories the Buddha talks about, and researchers still use to this day: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And it's the unpleasant sensations that we're focused on, because when these unpleasant sensations comes in, a domino falls. Evaluation starts. You start going, oh, this is annoying. I don't like this. And often what that does, albeit to the lack of our awareness, is it amplifies the original pain. We upregulate our threat response across a wide variety of physiological processes, from hormonal to neurological, where the body upregulates its threat response. And what we know from decades of pain research is the more threat you perceive, the higher your pain is likely to be. But what if we had a moment to pay attention and slow that down? Now, how we do this, it depends. We know from studies on long-term meditators that, compared to just average people like yourself and myself, that when we put a hot poker on their wrist, the long-term meditators will literally report a less intense sensation than those who hadn't been meditating at all. Okay, that's nice, but not all of us want to practice meditation for an hour a day for decades. What if I told you that there's research to suggest that just one 30-minute session. No more, no less. One 30-minute session can have nearly the same effect on people. So when you're working with people in a clinical context and they're in pain, let's say they come in with intense back pain, you can take them and slow down and get them to stop and just pay attention to the sensation. Psychologists do this all the time to change behavior. Just stopping and feeling what's going on can allow us to distinguish between what is originally there and what we might be amplifying. And what we know from this is that initially it takes a bit of practice, and that there's a variety of ways to do it, because mindfulness and meditation are actually two different things. You can be mindful in any context. You can be mindful paying attention in a non-judgmental, non-elaborative way in the present moment, as the definition goes, when you're walking, when you're talking with someone, as I'm doing with you all now. Whereas meditation is this isolated practice. And so what I think is helpful about this, and before I go on too much longer, is that mindfulness can be drawn out from like a concentrate out of a juice and given to people in whatever context they prefer. Let's say Jenny, 60-year-old, likes walking her dog. You can get her to pay attention to the sense of her body moving in space as a way of downregulating that pain. And we know that this is more effective than opioids themselves. We know that we can do it to someone in just a 30-minute session. And we know that long-term, this has vast impacts on people's, not only their intensity and unpleasantness of the pain, but how much they actually then participate in their life, what they like doing, what they love doing. And so it connects them back to a sense of what's important to them, which I think is the whole point of physio itself and why we're all here. To summarize, when we feel a sensation, when we feel a pain, there's a tendency for us to inflame it, to exaggerate it, to make it worse. And unfortunately, this is unconscious and just a part of how our nervous system has evolved to protect us. But we have an opportunity that doesn't require years of practice, but just 30 minutes to slow down, pay attention, and learn to separate the judgment, the elaboration on what you're feeling in the moment, to just feel it, because it's inescapable. Unfortunately, we think we can escape from these things, but the hard truth is that pain is a reality, but suffering perhaps is not.